We're going to cross live now to London, where I'm joined by former UK Prime Minister, the Honourable Liz Truss. Well, I'm delighted to have you on the program, Liz. Thank you for making time for us tonight.
Great to be here, Peter.
Strong audience.
Just an hour ago, Liz Truss and Keir Starmer went head-to-head in one of the most explosive TV moments we've seen in British politics. Truss, with fire in her eyes, fiercely defended her crumbling policies, declaring herself a fighter, not a quitter. At the same time, Starmer ripped into her for the economic chaos her leadership had caused. You could feel the tension through the screen as she refused to back down. But with so much at stake, it begs the question: how much longer can Truss hold on before her time finally runs out?
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. I have acted in the national interest to make sure that we have economic stability.
During a heated exchange in Parliament, Liz Truss delivered one of her most memorable political career moments when she proclaimed, "I am a fighter, not a quitter." In just under 2 months as Prime Minister, Truss found herself under immense pressure. But her bold statement reflected her determination to defend her record, despite widespread criticism. Truss wasn't ready to back down, and in front of a charged crowd, she stood firm, highlighting her policy achievements as proof that she could still deliver results.
Mr. Speaker, I have been in office for just under 2 months, and I have delivered the energy price guarantee, making sure that people aren't paying £6,000 bills this winter.
One of the main points she brought up was the energy price guarantee, a policy aimed at protecting families from facing soaring energy bills during the winter. This was a major concern for many Britons, with some predicting energy bills as high as £6,000. Truss claimed her government's action on energy was essential in shielding households from financial disaster. She also emphasised the reversal of the national insurance increase, which she framed as a relief for working people and businesses. This move was seen as an effort to undo some of the financial burdens imposed by previous Conservative policies. Additionally, Truss took a hard stance against militant unions, promising to introduce policies that would prevent strikes from further disrupting the economy, particularly in key sectors like transportation.
Vulnerable for 2 years. But I had to take the decision, because of the economic situation, to adjust our policy.
The public's reaction to Truss's speech was a mixed bag. On one hand, her supporters praised her resilience and her willingness to stand by her policies in the face of mounting opposition. For them, Truss represented a leader willing to make tough decisions even when unpopular. Her fighter claim became a rallying cry among her most loyal base. On the other hand, critics quickly labelled her speech as a desperate attempt to cling to power. Many felt that her policies had already caused enough damage, especially in the financial markets, and saw her defiance as tone-deaf to the struggles facing everyday people. The economic fallout under her brief leadership was hard to ignore, and no amount of defiant rhetoric could erase the damage done.
And the economic conditions have worsened, and we are being honest. We're levelling with the public, unlike the Honourable Gentleman who simply won't do it. And what is the Honourable Gentleman doing about the fact that workers, train workers, are again going on strike?
Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, wasted no time in tearing into Liz Truss during their heated exchange in Parliament. His primary accusation: Truss had recklessly conducted what he described as an economic experiment on the British public, leading to widespread financial instability. Starmer was ruthless, painting a picture of an out-of-touch Prime Minister who had gambled with the economy and left ordinary citizens to pick up the pieces.
For one reason, and one reason only, because they crashed the economy. And working people are going to have to pay 500 quid more a month on their mortgages.
One of the central points of Starmer's attack was the soaring mortgage payments that many Britons were suddenly facing. In the wake of Truss's controversial mini-budget, interest rates had shot up, leaving homeowners with massive increases in their monthly payments. Some were reportedly facing hikes of £500 or more, and for families already struggling with rising costs of living, this was a disaster. Starmer seized on this, accusing Truss of being directly responsible for the economic chaos. According to him, her government's abrupt policy changes had sent shockwaves through the financial markets, causing the pound to plummet and leading to a crisis of confidence in the UK economy.
What's the point of a Prime Minister whose promises don't even last a week?
Prime Minister!
Well, I can assure the right honourable gentleman that spending will go up next year and it will go up the year after. But of course...
In his typical fashion, Starmer didn't hold back. He pointed out the flip-flopping on policy decisions that had marked Truss's short time in office. One week, she was defending a tax cut for the wealthiest earners, and the next, that very policy was scrapped after a public outcry. For Starmer, this was indicative of a government that had no clear direction and no coherent plan. He framed Truss as a leader who had already lost control of her administration and was desperately trying to salvage her reputation amidst a storm of policy reversals.
Financial ruin, at least she apologised.
Prime Minister!
I do think there has to be some reflection of economic reality from the party opposite.
But it was Starmer's biting sarcasm that left a lasting impression on viewers. When Truss apologised for the economic turmoil, Starmer's response was scathing. He mocked her apology, suggesting that no amount of saying sorry could undo the financial ruin she had caused. What does she think people will say? He asked rhetorically, about homeowners facing unaffordable mortgages. That's all right. I don't mind financial ruin. At least she apologised. His remark resonated with many who felt that an apology wasn't nearly enough given the scale of the damage.
Stood there and promised absolutely no spending reductions. They all cheered. This week, the Chancellor announced a new wave of cuts. What's the point of a Prime Minister whose promises don't even last a week?
When it came to the debate over spending cuts, Liz Truss and Keir Starmer were locked in a heated exchange, each painting the other as dishonest and out of touch. Truss confidently asserted that spending would continue to rise over the next few years, positioning herself as someone who could balance the need for economic stability while still investing in critical services. She insisted that despite the challenges, her government was focused on maintaining public services and protecting the most vulnerable. To her, this meant more money flowing into key areas like healthcare, education, and social services, all while keeping the broader economy from spiralling out of control. On the other hand, Starmer wasn't buying it. He accused Truss of doing precisely the opposite of what she promised, pointing out how quickly her policies seemed to shift. One week, she was adamant about no spending cuts, and the next, her Chancellor was announcing a whole new wave of reductions. This back and forth gave Starmer all the ammunition he needed to argue that Truss was out of touch with the reality of what the country needed. In his view, the Tory government was in disarray, unable to stick to its word, and this constant flip-flopping only deepened the crisis of confidence in her leadership. Starmer's central argument was simple. How can the public trust a Prime Minister whose promises have such a short shelf life? He emphasised that the country needed stability, not the chaos of inconsistent leadership. The debate over public trust went beyond just spending policies. Starmer zeroed in on the credibility of Truss and her Conservative Party. He pointed to how quickly Truss had walked back on major promises, like the infamous tax cuts that were scrapped after causing financial panic. For Starmer, it wasn't just about the specifics of each policy. It was about whether the British public could believe anything the Prime Minister said. He questioned whether a government that constantly reversed its positions could be trusted to guide the nation through a period of economic uncertainty. During the debate, Liz Truss aimed Keir Starmer and the Labour Party with a familiar accusation. that they were siding with striking unions rather than supporting hard-working British citizens. Truss framed herself as a champion of the working people, positioning Labour as out of touch with the real needs of the public. In her view, Labour's refusal to condemn strikes, particularly in key sectors like the railways, showed that Starmer's party was more interested in protecting union interests than ensuring the country ran smoothly. Truss hammered home the idea that the country needed to crack down on what she called militant unions, and claimed that her government would take action to prevent strikes from crippling the economy. She pointed to proposed legislation that would make it harder for unions to call strikes in critical industries, like transport, framing it as a way to protect ordinary workers from the disruption that strikes caused. For Truss, this was a clear-cut issue. Labour was standing with the unions, while she was standing with the workers. But Starmer wasn't going to let this accusation slide. He fired back, arguing that Labour was a government in waiting with a real plan to protect ordinary citizens. In his view, the strikes were a symptom of a much bigger problem, a government that had neglected the needs of working people for too long. Starmer argued that instead of scapegoating the unions, Truss should focus on fixing the underlying issues that were driving people to strike in the first place, such as low wages, poor working conditions, and the rising cost of living. He painted a picture of a government out of touch with the struggles facing ordinary people, accusing Truss of ignoring the root causes of the strikes. Keir Starmer delivered a powerful and sharp final blow during his heated exchange with Liz Truss, asking the question on everyone's mind. Why is Truss still here? After everything that had unfolded under her brief leadership, Starmer laid it all out. Her policies had failed, her credibility had been shattered, and even her closest allies had abandoned ship. In the middle of the chaos she had created, Starmer questioned how she still dared to stand at the helm of the country. His words struck a chord, making many wonder the same thing. How much longer could Truss survive in the top job?
Just as energy prices are going up here in the UK. So it's a disastrous start for his government because they came in with no ideas about what they were going to do, apart from saying the Conservatives are evil. That was their only policy.
Starmer's argument was rooted in the undeniable list of failed policies that had come to define Truss's short tenure. He methodically ticked off the key economic decisions that had been reversed almost as quickly as they were introduced. The 45p tax cut for the wealthiest, initially trumpeted as a centrepiece of her economic vision, had been scrapped after it caused a political firestorm. Then came the corporation tax cut, another promised relief for businesses that ended up on the chopping block. Starmer didn't stop there. He reminded everyone about the energy price freeze that was supposed to last 2 years, but was soon reduced to just 6 months. One by one, these policies were abandoned, leaving Truss's economic credibility in tatters. To many, it seemed as though Truss had no control over her government, let alone the direction of the country. As Starmer laid out the failures of Truss's administration, his words resonated with a public already reeling from the economic fallout. Under Truss, the markets had gone into meltdown, the pound had plummeted, and mortgage rates had skyrocketed, leaving many households on the brink of financial ruin. Starmer's critique wasn't just about bad policies. It was about the very real and painful consequences that everyday Britons were facing because of Truss's decisions. People's savings were disappearing, their mortgage payments were becoming unmanageable, and there seemed to be no end in sight. Starmer's call to question why Truss was still in charge echoed the frustration of millions who had lost confidence in her leadership. The fallout from Liz Truss's disastrous time in office didn't just affect her. It sent shockwaves through the entire Conservative Party. The internal turmoil within the party had been evident for months, but Truss's leadership seemed to push it into full-blown crisis mode. Keir Starmer used this to his advantage, highlighting how Truss had damaged not only her credibility, but also the party's ability to govern. The political implosion of the Tory party was on full display, with MPs openly criticising her decisions and key figures in the party either distancing themselves or resigning altogether. Truss's inability to hold her government together became a glaring example of how far the Conservatives had fallen. For many in the public, the chaos within the Conservative Party only deepened their distrust of the government. It wasn't just about one failed leader. Truss's tenure revealed the deeper fractures within the party itself. Starmer emphasised this point, reminding voters that the instability wasn't going to go away with just one resignation or policy reversal. The damage had already been done. The public was left wondering if the Tories were even capable of fixing the problems they had caused. Trust in the party had plummeted, and Starmer made it clear that Labour was ready to step in as a stable alternative.